The eviction notice was the color of rot. A sickly, pale yellow paper taped to my door, its edges curling in the damp hallway air. It felt less like a legal document and more like a declaration of failure, a public shaming for the entire third floor of the peeling, water-stained apartment building to witness. My stomach, already a tight knot of anxiety, clenched into a fist of pure ice. 30 days. I had 30 days to come up with 3 months of back rent, or everything I owned would be piled on the curb of a forgotten street in a city that had already chewed me up and was preparing to spit me out. My key trembled in my hand, the cheap metal scraping against the lock. Inside, the apartment was a testament to my struggle. The furniture was a collection of mismatched second-hand pieces I dragged home from thrift stores and sidewalk sales. A lumpy floral couch, a wobbly kitchen table with only 3 stable chairs, a bookshelf made of cinder blocks and pine planks. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the small, quiet sanctuary I had painstakingly built after fleeing the wreckage of my life with Liam. The faint scent of lavender from the plug-in air freshener battled valiantly against the building's permanent odor of mildew and boiled cabbage. It was a losing fight. I sank onto the lumpy couch, the springs groaning in protest. My nurse's uniform felt stiff and foreign against my skin, a costume for a person who was competent and in control, a person who saved lives and soothed fears. It felt like a lie. How could I project calm and capability when my own life was a slow-motion catastrophe? The double shifts at the clinic barely covered my student loans and the mountain of debt Liam had left in his wake. A parting gift from the man who had promised me the world and given me only empty pockets and a hollowed-out heart. My gaze drifted to the stack of red-stamped envelopes on the coffee table. Final notices, each one a paper cut to my soul. I pushed them aside, my fingers brushing against the worn cover of a medical textbook. I had dreams once of becoming a pediatric surgeon. Now, my dreams were much smaller, much more desperate. A paid-up electricity bill, a refrigerator with more than condiments and a half-empty carton of milk, a single night of sleep uninterrupted by the gnawing fear of homelessness. There was only one place I could go where the walls didn't feel like they were closing in. One place where the quiet was a comfort, not a confirmation of my loneliness. The Black Iris. It was a small, unassuming bar tucked away on a side street, a place lost in time. It had no blaring music, no flashing lights, just dark wood, low lighting, and the clink of ice in heavy glasses. And it had Cal. He was the bartender, a man who seemed as much a fixture of the place as the mahogany bar he polished with slow, deliberate circles. He was quiet, almost unnervingly so. He rarely smiled, but his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, missed nothing. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a stillness about him that was both calming and intimidating. He moved with an economy of motion, never a wasted step or a hurried gesture. In a city of noise and chaos, he was an island of silence. I never knew his last name. I never asked. In the anonymous comfort of the Black Iris, he was just Cal. That night, I took my usual seat at the far end of the bar, the worn leather of the stool a familiar comfort. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of old men nursing beers in a corner booth. The air smelled of aged whiskey, lemon polish, and something else. Something uniquely Cal. A faint, clean scent like rain on pavement. He saw me and nodded, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he placed a coaster in front of me and began mixing my usual, a simple gin and tonic. His hands were large and surprisingly graceful, his movements precise as a surgeon's. There were faint, silvery scars crisscrossing his knuckles, old stories I knew better than to ask about. He was a man made of shadows and secrets, and I, for some reason, found that profoundly soothing. He never pried, never offered platitudes. He just listened. Rough shift? His voice was a low rumble like distant thunder. It was the first thing he'd ever said to me beyond a simple greeting. The question, so simple, so direct, cracked the dam I had built around my panic. The tears I'd been holding back all day burned behind my eyes. I blinked them away furiously, staring down at the swirling ice in my glass. "You could say that," I managed, my own voice thin and brittle. He slid the finished drink toward me. "It's on the house." I looked up, surprised. His gaze was steady, intense. It felt like being weighed and measured. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said, and went back to polishing a glass, the conversation apparently over. But it wasn't. The unexpected kindness, the quiet solitude of the bar, the sheer weight of my desperation, it all conspired against my resolve. The words tumbled out of me, a messy, whispered confession. I told him about the eviction notice, the debt, the suffocating fear of having nowhere to go. I didn't tell him about Liam, not by name, but I spoke of the betrayal, of being left to clean up a mess that wasn't mine. I talked to the dark wood of the bar, to my reflection in the mirror behind the rows of gleaming bottles, to the silent man who just kept polishing glasses, his presence a steady anchor in my storm. When I finally fell silent, my throat raw and my cheeks wet, I felt a flush of shame. I had just burdened a complete stranger with the sordid details of my pathetic life. I was a mess, and now he knew it. I fumbled in my purse for a few crumpled bills, my hands shaking. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Here, for the drink." He placed a large warm hand over mine, stopping me. His touch was electric, a jolt that went straight through me. It wasn't gentle. It was firm, possessive. A claim. "Keep your money, Alara," he said, his voice low and devoid of pity. It was a statement of fact. "You need it more than I do." He knew my name. I'd paid with a credit card a few times, but I'd never imagined he'd noticed, let alone remembered. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold traced a path down my spine. His sea-gray eyes held mine, and for a fleeting moment, the quiet bartender disappeared. In his place was someone else, someone harder, more dangerous, a predator, handsome and still. Then it was gone, and he was just Cal again, turning away to serve another customer who had just walked in. I left the bar that night feeling strangely lighter, as if confessing my sins to the silent bartender had somehow absolved me. The feeling didn't last. The next 2 weeks were a frantic, desperate scramble. I sold what little I had of value, a gold locket from my grandmother, my collection of textbooks, my laptop. I picked up every extra shift I could, working until my feet were swollen and my vision blurred with exhaustion. It was never enough. It was a drop of water in a vast arid desert of debt. The day the final notice arrived, a stark white envelope slid under my door, my hope finally fractured. This one wasn't yellow. It was a cold, clinical white. It gave me 48 hours. My breath hitched. My world shrank to the 4 walls of my tiny apartment, the floral couch, the wobbly table. Soon, even these would be gone. I sat on the floor, my back against the door as if I could physically bar reality from entering, and I sobbed. I cried for my lost dreams, for my foolish trust in a man who had broken it, for the terrifying, gaping emptiness of my future. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me, a harsh, intrusive sound. An unknown number. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Annoyed, I snatched it up, ready to yell at whatever telemarketer was hounding me at the worst possible moment of my life. I swiped to answer, my voice thick with tears. What? Is this Alara? The voice on the other end was not a telemarketer. It was deep, calm, and utterly unfamiliar. It radiated authority. Who is this? I asked, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. My name is Marcus. I work for a friend of yours. Cal. My heart stuttered. Cal? How did this man get my number? I don't understand. How? He's been worried about you. Marcus interrupted smoothly, as if my confusion was an expected but irrelevant detail. He asked me to check in. Are you all right? No, I whispered, the word a raw admission of defeat. No, I'm not. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence that felt heavy with calculation. Stay where you are, the voice commanded, not requested. Do not leave your apartment. We are 5 minutes away. We? Who's we? What are you talking about? Panic, sharp and cold, sliced through my despair. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. The quiet bartender didn't have associates who called from blocked numbers and spoke in commands. Just stay put, Ilara, Marcus said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, but the order remained. Everything is going to be all right now. He hung up. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. A friend of Cal's? We? What was happening? I scrambled to my feet and ran to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. My apartment overlooked the crumbling parking lot, a patchwork of cracked asphalt and faded yellow lines. It was usually half empty, populated by a few rusted, dented cars. Not anymore. As I watched, a procession of sleek black SUVs turned onto my street, their tinted windows reflecting the gray afternoon sky like obsidian mirrors. They moved with a silent, synchronized precision that was deeply unsettling. They weren't just cars. They were a statement. They were a show of force. They pulled into the lot, forming a perfect, intimidating line, taking up nearly a dozen spots. Doors opened in unison, and men in dark, impeccably tailored suits emerged. They were large, stoic, and moved with the disciplined grace of soldiers. They fanned out, securing the perimeter, their eyes scanning the windows, the doorways, the street. My street. My rundown, forgotten street. One of the men, distinguished by a silver tie and an air of quiet command, strode toward the entrance of my building. Marcus. It had to be. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, my back against the wall beneath the window. This wasn't a wellness check. This was an invasion. Cal wasn't just a bartender. A bartender didn't have a private army. A cold dread, far more profound than my fear of eviction, seeped into my bones. I had confided in a man I knew nothing about, and in my desperation, I had invited a monster into my life. The knock on my door was not a knock. It was a firm, definitive rap of knuckles against wood. It wasn't a question. It was an announcement of arrival. I didn't move. My entire body was frozen, a statue carved from fear. He knocked again, the sound echoing the frantic beat of my own heart. Ilara. The voice from the phone, Marcus's voice, called through the thin wood. Please open the door. Mr. Moretti sent us for you. Moretti. The name meant nothing to me, and yet it sounded heavy, dangerous. It certainly wasn't Cal. My mind reeled, trying to connect the quiet man who polished glasses with this overwhelming display of power. It was impossible. It was like trying to imagine a stray cat commanding a pack of wolves. "I'm not going anywhere," I shouted, my voice trembling but defiant. "Tell your boss to leave me alone." There was another pause. I could hear the faint murmur of his voice as he spoke into a phone or a radio. Then, silence. A minute stretched into an eternity. I held my breath, praying they would just leave. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. It was an incoming call. The same unknown number. With a shaking finger, I answered it, pressing the phone to my ear. "Alara." The voice was Cal's, that low, rumbling thunder. But it was different now, stripped of any warmth, any pretense of the quiet bartender. It was cold, hard, and laced with an authority that demanded obedience. It was the voice of a king. "Let Marcus in," he commanded. "Who are you?" I whispered, the question I should have asked weeks ago. "I'm the man who is going to solve your problems," he stated, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "But you have to open the door. I can't help you if you won't let me." "I don't want your help," I lied, the eviction notice feeling like a brand on my soul. "I don't even know you." "You know me," he said, a strange note of something that might have been patience in his tone. "You just don't know my name. Now open the door. You're scaring the neighbors." I risked another glance out the window. Old Mr. Henderson from 2B was peeking through his blinds, his face a mask of bewildered terror. Mrs. Gable from across the hall had her door cracked open, a sliver of her floral housecoat visible. This spectacle was for me. I was the cause. The shame was a hot flush on my skin. With a sense of grim finality, I pushed myself to my feet. My fate was no longer in my hands. It had been wrested from me the moment those black cars had turned onto my street. I walked to the door, my legs feeling like lead, and turned the deadbolt. The click sounded like a death sentence. I pulled the door open. Marcus stood there, flanked by two other men who were built like mountains. He was tall, with sharp features, dark hair slicked back, and eyes that were as observant and unreadable as his employer's. He was holding a phone to his ear. "She's opened it, sir," he said into the phone, his gaze fixed on me. He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, sir." He lowered the phone and offered it to me. "He wants to speak with you." I took the phone, my hand clammy against the cool metal. "Hello?" "Pack a bag, Alara," Cal, or whoever he was, said. "Just the essentials. Anything you can't live without for a few days." "A few days? Where am I going?" My voice was a squeak. "You're coming with me, to a place where you'll be safe, a place where no one can put you out on the street." The words hung in the air, a promise and a threat all at once. Safe. The word was a siren song to my terrified soul. But safe with whom? With a man who commanded a small army and had a name he didn't share? I can't just leave," I stammered, gesturing vaguely at my shabby apartment. "My things. My job." "Your things will be collected and put in storage. Your job has been handled. You've been granted a leave of absence due to a family emergency." His voice was flat, leaving no room for argument. He had already rearranged my life without my permission. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "You can't do that." "I already have," he replied simply. "Marcus will help you pack. You have 10 minutes." And then he was gone. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the impassive face of the man named Marcus. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward my bedroom. The message was clear. Time was wasting. This wasn't a rescue. It was an abduction. A polite, well-orchestrated, and utterly terrifying abduction. I was being extracted from my life, and I was too broken and too scared to do anything but obey. With a strangled sob, I turned and walked toward my bedroom, the silent, suited men following like shadows. I had fallen into the orbit of a dark star, and its gravity was pulling me apart. The ride was silent and surreal. I sat in the back of the lead SUV, sandwiched between the window and the imposing, silent bulk of Marcus. The leather seats were cool and smelled of wealth, a stark contrast to the lingering scent of stale coffee and antiseptic that clung to my nurse's scrubs. I had packed a small duffel bag with a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, and the only photograph I had of my parents, its frame cheap and worn. It felt like packing for my own funeral. We swept through the city, the black cars parting traffic like a school of sharks. People stared. No one got in our way. The world I knew, the world of bus schedules, grocery budgets, and overdue bills, felt a million miles away. I was in a different reality now, one that operated on a different set of rules. Cal's rules, Moretti's rules. We left the city behind, the landscape shifting from grimy concrete and steel to lush green countryside. Soon, we were driving through a dense forest, the road a winding ribbon of perfect black asphalt. Then I saw it. A massive gate of wrought iron, at least 20 feet high, flanked by stone walls that disappeared into the trees on either side. It looked like the entrance to a royal estate. Guards in uniforms that matched the dark suits of my escort stood at attention, their faces grim. The gate swung open silently, and we drove through. The driveway was long, lined with ancient oak trees that formed a cathedral-like canopy overhead. It opened into a circular drive in front of a house that wasn't a house. It was a mansion, a modern fortress of glass, dark stone, and rich mahogany, built into the side of a hill overlooking a vast, sparkling lake. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly intimidating. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a headquarters. Marcus led me inside. The front doors were massive slabs of wood that opened into a cavernous foyer. The floor was polished black marble that reflected the soaring two-story ceiling. A grand staircase that looked like a floating sculpture of steel and glass curved up to the second floor. One entire wall was a window, offering a panoramic view of the lake and the distant mountains. Priceless art hung on the other walls, pieces I recognized from art history textbooks. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of citrus and clean, empty space. My worn sneakers squeaked on the pristine marble. I felt like a stray animal that had wandered into a museum, my presence a smudge on the perfect, sterile beauty of the place. I clutched my duffel bag to my chest like a shield. "This way," Marcus said, his voice a low murmur. He led me through a series of vast, beautifully decorated rooms, a living area with white leather couches and a fireplace large enough to stand in, a dining room with a table that could seat 30, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and rolling ladders. Every room was a testament to unimaginable wealth and impeccable taste. It was also completely devoid of any personal touches. No photographs, no clutter, no sign that a human being actually lived here. It was a gilded cage, and I was its newest, most unwilling occupant. Finally, we stopped in front of a set of double doors. Marcus knocked once, then opened them and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside and the doors closed softly behind me, leaving me alone. It was an office dominated by another floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the lake. A massive desk of dark, polished wood sat in the center of the room, stark and empty, except for a sleek laptop and a single black phone. And behind it, standing and looking out at the water, was Cal. He was no longer wearing the simple black t-shirt and jeans of the bartender. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. The expensive clothes didn't change him so much as reveal him. They were a skin he was born to wear. The quiet bartender had been the costume. This was the man. Alessandro Moretti. He turned slowly, and his stormy gray eyes met mine across the vast expanse of the room. The unreadable bartender was gone. This man was all sharp edges and coiled power. His gaze was a physical force, pinning me in place. "Ilara," he said. His voice was the same low rumble, but in this room it echoed with power. "Welcome to my home." "This isn't a home," I shot back, my fear giving way to a surge of anger. "It's a fortress, and I'm your prisoner." A flicker of something. Amusement? Respect? Crossed his face. "You are not a prisoner. You are a guest. My guest." "Guests get invited," I retorted, taking a step forward. I was taken. "Your men. Those cars. You terrified my neighbors. You ripped me out of my life." "Your life was falling apart," he stated, his voice calm and level. It was the cold, dispassionate tone of a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "The apartment you couldn't afford, the debt you couldn't pay, the ex-boyfriend who bled you dry and disappeared. I didn't rip you from your life, Ilara. I saved you from it." The accuracy of his words stole the air from my lungs. He knew about Liam. Of course he knew. A man like this, a man with a private army and a fortress for a house, would know everything. He had probably run a full background check on me the first time I'd ordered a gin and tonic from him. The thought was violating, a trespass against the very core of my being. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He walked around the desk, his movements fluid and predatory. He stopped a few feet in front of me, and I had to crane my neck to look up at him. He was even taller than I'd realized. He smelled of expensive cologne and something uniquely him, that scent of rain and cold, clean air. It was intoxicating and terrifying. "I am going to make you an offer," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I am going to wipe out every cent of your debt, the student loans, the credit cards Liam maxed out in your name, all of it. It will be gone. I will handle your landlord. You will never have to worry about an eviction notice again. I will give you a life free of financial fear." I stared at him, speechless. It was an impossible offer, a fairy tale solution to a nightmare reality. The debt was a physical weight on my chest, a monster that haunted my every waking moment. To have it simply gone? It was unthinkable. "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "Why would you do that for me? You don't know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you work double shifts as a nurse to pay off another man's mistakes. I know you're drowning, and you haven't asked a single person for help. I know you have more integrity in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies, and I know I don't like seeing good people suffer." His words were a strange mix of clinical observation and something that sounded almost like admiration. It was disorienting. "And what do you want in return?" I asked, because there was always a price. Nothing in this world was free, especially not a gift of this magnitude. "I want you to stay here," he said simply. "Stay here? For how long?" "For as long as it takes." "Takes for what?" I pressed, my frustration growing. His answers were riddles wrapped in commands. "For you to be safe," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more intense. "And for me to handle the man who put you in this position." Liam. Just hearing the name from his lips sent a chill down my spine. "You leave him alone," I said, the words a knee-jerk reaction. Liam was a weak, selfish coward, but he didn't deserve to get tangled up with a man like Alessandro Moretti. Alessandro's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. Men like that don't get left alone, he said, his voice turning to ice. They face consequences. He used you. He abandoned you. He left you to drown in his mess. That is a debt that must be paid, and I will be the one to collect. The finality in his tone was absolute. Liam's fate was sealed, and so, it seemed, was mine. So that's it? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. I'm to be your... what? Your ward? Your pet project? Locked away in this big empty house while you play God with my life? You will not be locked away, he corrected me, his patience wearing thin. You will be protected. There is a difference. He took a step closer, and I instinctively took a step back, my back hitting the solid wood of the door. He placed a hand on the door next to my head, caging me in. His proximity was overwhelming, his sheer physical presence sucking all the air out of the room. I could see the flecks of silver in his stormy eyes. Why are you really doing this? I whispered, my defiance crumbling. His expression softened for a fraction of a second, a crack in the granite facade. A hint of something vulnerable, something human, flickered in his eyes before being extinguished. My mother, he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. She was a lot like you, kind, trusting. She worked as a seamstress, worked her fingers to the bone for a man who promised her everything. My father. He wasn't a good man. He was weak, like your Liam. He made promises he couldn't keep, ran up debts with men he shouldn't have crossed, and when they came to collect, he used her as a shield. He left her to face them alone. He paused, his gaze distant, lost in a painful memory. She paid a price for his weakness, a price no woman should ever have to pay. I was just a boy. I couldn't protect her then. His eyes refocused on me, and the intensity was searing. I can protect you now. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and heavy. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. It was the key that unlocked the puzzle of Alessandro Moretti. His obsession, his need for control, his fierce, terrifying protectiveness. It was all born from the helpless rage of a little boy who had watched his mother suffer. My situation hadn't just earned his sympathy. It had triggered a deep, primal wound. My anger dissipated, replaced by a wave of something far more complicated. I saw past the powerful, intimidating man, the mafia king he so clearly was, and saw the ghost of that boy, vowing to never be helpless again. Marcus will show you to your room, he said, pulling back, the moment of vulnerability over as quickly as it had begun. The mask of command was back in place. It has its own balcony. You are free to go anywhere on the estate grounds, but you are not to leave them. Not yet. Rest. Eat. We will talk more tomorrow. He turned and walked back to his desk, his broad back a clear dismissal. The audience was over. As if on cue, the door opened and Marcus was there. His face was as impassive as ever, but I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He had likely heard the whole exchange. He probably knew the story of Alessandro's mother better than anyone. I allowed him to lead me up the floating staircase and down a long, silent hallway. The room he showed me to was not a room. It was a suite. It was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in soft creams and blues. A massive bed with a mountain of pillows sat in the center. A sitting area with a fireplace and plush armchairs was off to one side. A set of glass doors led to a private balcony with a stunning view of the lake. In the attached bathroom, the tub was big enough to swim in, and in the walk-in closet, my small, shabby duffel bag looked pathetic next to racks of new clothes, dresses, sweaters, jeans, shoes, all in my size. He had thought of everything. He had anticipated every need. It was thoughtful. It was controlling. It was terrifying. I walked out onto the balcony, the cool evening air a balm on my flushed skin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, the colors reflecting on the placid surface of the lake. The estate was silent, peaceful, an oasis of tranquility. But I knew it was an illusion. The beauty was a cage, no matter how gilded. The silence was the sound of isolation. And the man who had put me here was more dangerous than any debt, any eviction notice, any ghost from my past. I was safe from my old life, but I had a sinking feeling I had just stumbled into a far more dangerous one. The days that followed blurred into a strange, dreamlike routine. I woke up in a bed softer than a cloud, to a silence broken only by the chirping of birds outside my balcony. Meals appeared as if by magic, brought by a silent gray-haired housekeeper named Sophia who never spoke, only smiled sadly. I explored the mansion, a lonely ghost haunting its opulent, empty rooms. I read books from the vast library, swam in the indoor pool that looked like a Roman bath, and walked for hours through the manicured gardens that surrounded the house. It was a life of incredible luxury, a fantasy I could never have imagined. And I had never been more miserable. The loneliness was a physical ache. I was completely isolated, cut off from everything I knew. My phone had no service here, and the house's Wi-Fi required a password I didn't have. Alessandro was a phantom. I saw him only occasionally, a glimpse of his tall frame disappearing into his office, the low murmur of his voice on a phone call as I passed by. He was avoiding me, leaving me to acclimate to my new cage. One afternoon, I was sitting by the lake, skipping stones across the water when I heard a twig snap behind me. I turned to see Marcus standing there, his hands clasped behind his back. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said. "It's fine," I replied, turning back to the lake. "It's just quiet here." He came to stand beside me, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. We stood in silence for a few moments, watching the ripples spread across the water. "He's doing this to protect you," Marcus said suddenly, his voice low. "He's doing this to control me," I countered without looking at him. "The two are not mutually exclusive in his world," Marcus replied, a hint of weariness in his tone. "For Mr. Moretti, control is protection." I finally turned to look at him. His face, usually a mask of professional stoicism, held a trace of something else. Loyalty. Absolute, unwavering loyalty. "Why are you so loyal to him?" I asked. He looked out at the lake. "When I was 18, my father got in deep with the wrong people. A loan shark. He couldn't pay. They were going to make an example of him, of my whole family. Alessandro was just a young man then, just starting to build his own name, separate from his father's stained legacy. He heard about it. He stepped in. He paid the debt, and he made the problem disappear. He asked for nothing in return. But I pledged my life to him that day. He protects his own, Ilara. And whether you accept it or not, you are now his own." The words sent a shiver through me. His own. It sounded so possessive, so permanent. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He answered it, his demeanor shifting back to the consummate professional. "Yes, sir." He listened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The Petrovs? Understood." I'm on my way. He hung up, his jaw tight. I have to go. He gave me a look, a warning. Stay inside the house for the rest of the day. Why? What's wrong? Just do it, he said, his voice sharp before turning and striding quickly back toward the mansion. The Petrovs. The name meant nothing to me, but the urgency in Marcus's voice sparked a new kind of fear. This wasn't about my past anymore. This was about Alessandro's present. A new threat was emerging, one that lived in his world of shadows and violence. That night, the atmosphere in the house changed. The quiet, empty feeling was replaced by a tense, humming energy. More men in dark suits appeared, materializing silently in hallways and doorways. They were armed. I saw the distinct bulge of a gun under a suit jacket, the glint of a holster. The fortress had gone on high alert. I found Alessandro in his office. He was on the phone, his back to me, staring out the window into the blackness. His voice was dangerously soft, a silken threat. Dmitri, you know the arrangement, he was saying. You stay on your side of the river, I stay on mine. Sending your thugs to poke around my businesses is a breach of that peace. There was a pause as he listened, his shoulders rigid. That's not a rumor you want to be spreading, he continued, his voice dropping even lower, and it's certainly not one you want to be acting on. Consider this your only warning. Pull your dogs back, or I will put them down. He ended the call, slamming the phone down with controlled violence. He stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, before he seemed to sense my presence, and turned. His face was a thunderous mask. What are you doing here? He bit out. What's going on? I asked, refusing to be intimidated. Who are the Petrovs? It's nothing that concerns you, he said, dismissing me as he walked toward a liquor cabinet built into the wall. He poured a glass of amber liquid and downed it in one swallow. It concerns me when my prison guards are suddenly carrying guns, I shot back. Marcus told me to stay inside. Is it because of them? Am I in danger? He slammed the glass down on the cabinet, the sound cracking through the tense silence. He whirled around to face me, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. Yes, you are in danger, he roared, his control finally snapping. You are in danger because you are here, with me. The Petrovs are our rivals. They're animals, scavengers. They've heard a rumor that I have a weakness, a vulnerability, something they can use against me. He strode toward me until he was looming over me, his voice a low, furious growl. They think you are that weakness. So yes, you will stay inside. You will do exactly as I say. Because if they get their hands on you, what they will do to you will make your pathetic ex-boyfriend look like a saint. Do you understand me? I was trembling, my heart racing from his outburst, but I met his furious gaze. I finally understood. The gilded cage wasn't just to keep me in, it was to keep the rest of the world out. His world. My presence here, which he had engineered for my protection, had now put me in the crosshairs of his enemies. So your solution to save me from one mess was to drag me into a much deadlier one? I asked, my voice shaking. His anger seemed to drain away, replaced by a deep, weary frustration. He raked a hand through his dark hair. That was not my intention. But it's what happened, I said softly. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the immense weight he carried, the burden of his empire, the constant threat of violence, the solitude of his power. In that moment, I didn't just see a monster. I saw a man trying to protect me, using the only tools he had: force, control, and intimidation. The next few days were a blur of tension. The guards remained, a constant, silent presence. Alessandra was a whirlwind of dark energy, consumed by meetings and phone calls. I stayed out of his way, my fear for my own safety now mingled with a strange new fear for his. One evening, Marcus appeared at my door. "It's time," he said simply. "Time for what?" "To resolve your personal threat," he said, his face grim. "We found Liam." A cold lump of dread formed in my stomach. What is Alessandro going to do? "He's going to have a conversation," Marcus said, but the look in his eyes told me it would be much more than that. "The boss wants you to witness it. He wants you to see that the threat is gone, permanently." He led me not to the office, but to a media room I hadn't seen before. A massive screen covered one wall. Alessandro was there, along with two other men I didn't recognize. He was staring at the screen, which was currently dark. He didn't look at me as I entered. "Show me," he commanded. Marcus tapped a tablet and the screen flickered to life. It was a live video feed, grainy and dark. It showed a dimly lit alleyway, and there, held between two of Alessandro's men, was Liam. He looked terrible, thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes wide with terror. He was struggling, but it was useless. Another man stepped out of the shadows. I recognized him as one of the men from the media room. He was holding a phone. He put it to Liam's ear. "Liam." Alessandro's voice boomed from the speakers in the room, cold and clear. "Do you know who this is?" "Please," Liam whimpered on the screen, his voice tinny. "I don't know what you want. I don't have any money." "I'm not here for your money," Alessandro said. "I'm here for Ilara's. Every dollar you stole, every debt you left her with, you are going to pay it back." "I can't. I don't have it." "That is not my concern," Alessandro said calmly. "My associate is going to explain the terms of your repayment plan. It will be strenuous. But before that, you are going to do one more thing. You are going to disappear. You will leave this city, this state. You will never contact Ilara again. You will never say her name again. If I ever hear that you have so much as thought in her direction, the next conversation we have will be our last. Am I clear?" "Yes. Yes, crystal clear," Liam sobbed. "Good." Alessandro looked at Marcus. "Cut the feed." The screen went black. The room was silent. I stood there, my body numb. I should have felt pity for Liam or horror at what I had just witnessed, but all I felt was a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. A weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying had been lifted. The ghost of Liam, the constant fear he might show up again, the shame of what he'd done to me, it was all gone. Erased in a 5-minute conversation by the man standing in front of me. Alessandro finally turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face. "It's done," he said. "He will never bother you again." I could only nod, unable to speak. He had neutralized the threat from my past. But the threat to our future was still circling. The confrontation with the Petrovs came 2 nights later. Alessandro came to my room. He was dressed in a dark suit, but he moved with a tension that I hadn't seen before. The calm commander was gone, replaced by a warrior preparing for battle. "I have to go out," he said, his voice quiet. "Is it them?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. He nodded. "Dmitry Petrov decided not to take my warning seriously. I have to deliver the message in person." "It's dangerous," I whispered. "Living is dangerous," he replied, a grim smile touching his lips. He reached out and cupped my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin. His hand was warm, calloused. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marcus." He held my gaze for a long moment, and in his eyes I saw a universe of unspoken things. Then he turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the long, empty hall. I did as he said. I locked the door and spent the night pacing the floor of my beautiful prison, my mind filled with terrible images. The hours crawled by. Each sound from outside the room made me jump. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I heard his footsteps in the hall. They were heavier than before, slower. I fumbled with the lock and threw the door open. He was there, leaning against the opposite wall. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt was untucked and stained with blood on one sleeve, and there was a cut over his eye. He looked utterly exhausted, but he was alive, and he was smiling. A real, tired, triumphant smile. "It's over," he said, his voice rough. "The Petrovs won't be a problem anymore." I rushed to him without thinking, my hands fluttering over his arm. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he grunted, but he leaned on me as I guided him into my room and sat him down on one of the armchairs. I ran to the bathroom and came back with the first aid kit I had found in one of the drawers, a nurse's instinct. My hands were shaking as I cleaned the cut above his eye. He sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on my face. The silence was thick with everything that had happened, everything we weren't saying. His blood was on my hands. The violence of his world was no longer an abstract concept. It was here, in this room, on his skin. "You should have been a surgeon," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "You have the hands for it." I finished taping a small bandage over the cut, my fingers lingering on his temple. "My hands shake too much," I whispered. "Not now, they don't," he said, and he covered my hand with his own. His grip was firm, grounding. "Thank you, Alara." All the barriers between us crumbled in that moment. The fear, the anger, the confusion. All that was left was the man in front of me, wounded and weary, and the undeniable, terrifying pull he had on my soul. He had torn my life apart and rebuilt it. He had terrified me and protected me. He was a monster and a savior. He lifted his other hand and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was feather-light, a stark contrast to the power he wielded. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. When his lips met mine, it wasn't a gentle exploration. It was a claiming. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, filled with the relief of survival and the promise of a new beginning. It tasted of whiskey and victory and blood. And in that kiss, I surrendered. I let go of the life I had lost and accepted the one that was being offered to me. It was dangerous. It was uncertain. But it was real. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't alone. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his stormy eyes searching mine. The last of his defenses seemed to fall away, leaving him raw and vulnerable before me. "I never intended for any of this," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "When I first saw you in that bar, so tired and so sad, but still so strong, I just wanted to fix it. I wanted to take the burdens off your shoulders. I didn't mean to replace them with my own." "You saved me, Alessandro," I said, my voice barely audible. "From Liam, from the debt, from being alone." "And I endangered you," he countered, a muscle in his jaw tightening. "The Petrovs. That was my fault. I brought my world to your doorstep." He pulled away completely then, standing up and walking over to the window. He stared out at the rising sun, his broad shoulders slumped with a weight that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. The victorious Mafia king was gone, replaced by a man filled with regret. "That's why you have to have a choice," he said, his back still to me. A real choice, not one made under duress, with my men on your doorstep. He turned back, and in his hand, he held a large manila envelope. He walked over and placed it on the small table between the armchairs. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. "What is this?" I asked, my heart sinking with a sudden, inexplicable dread. "Your freedom," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Inside that envelope is a passport with a new name, a driver's license, a birth certificate. All the documents you need to start a new life, anywhere you want. There is also a bank card. The account it's linked to has $10 million in it. Clean, untraceable. It's yours. Enough to go to any medical school in the world, to buy any house, to live any life you choose." I stared at the envelope, then back at his face. His expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. But his eyes were filled with a profound, aching pain. He was breaking his own heart, and he was doing it for me. "There's a car waiting for you at the front gate," he continued, his voice steady, rehearsed. "It will take you to a private airfield. A jet is on standby. It can take you anywhere. No one will follow you. No one will ever bother you again. You will be free of me, of my world. You can have your old life back, but better." He was giving me an out, a real, tangible way to escape the gilded cage and the dangerous man who had built it. It was everything I should have wanted. A week ago, I would have snatched that envelope and run without a second thought. But now, the thought of leaving, of never seeing him again, was a physical pain, a tearing in my chest. I stood up and walked over to the table. I looked down at the envelope, the key to a safe, quiet, lonely life. Then I looked up at him, at the dark, complicated, dangerous man who had shown me what it felt like to be protected, to be cherished, to be seen. I picked up the envelope. I saw the flicker of agony in his eyes, the bracing of his shoulders as he prepared for the blow. I walked over to the fireplace where the embers from the previous night still glowed faintly, and without a word, I tossed the envelope into the grate. We both watched as the corner of the manila paper began to curl, turning black before catching fire. The flames licked at it, consuming my new name, my new life, my $10 million, consuming my escape. Alessandro stared at the fire, then at me, his face a mask of disbelief. "What are you doing?" he breathed, his voice raw. "I'm making my choice," I said, my voice clear and steady for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I walked back to him, stopping directly in front of him, and placed my hands on his chest. I could feel the frantic, heavy beat of his heart beneath my palm. "My old life is gone. I don't want it back. It was small and sad, and I was all alone." I looked up into his stormy gray eyes, letting him see everything I was feeling. The fear, the uncertainty, but also the fierce, unshakable certainty of my decision. "I choose this," I whispered. "The danger, the uncertainty, this big, empty house. I choose you, Alessandro." A shudder went through his powerful frame. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me against him in an embrace so tight it was almost painful. He buried his face in my hair, and I felt something wet on my neck. He was crying. The powerful, untouchable Alessandro Moretti was crying. He held me as if I were the only thing anchoring him to the world, his body trembling with the force of his relief. "I didn't think you would stay," he choked out, his voice thick. "I was so sure you would leave." "How could I leave?" I murmured into his chest. "You're the only home I have left." He pulled back just enough to look down at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He framed my face with his large, warm hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears that had started to fall from my own eyes. "Then this will be a home," he declared, his voice filled with a new, fierce conviction. "Not just a house. Our home. I swear it." The tension of the last few weeks, the fear and the violence, melted away, leaving only a profound sense of peace. The threats were gone, both old and new. The choices had been made. What remained was us. Later that day, after he had slept for a few hours and I had tended to his wounds again, he took me to a part of the house I had never seen. It was a wing that had been closed off, the furniture covered in white sheets. It felt different from the rest of the mansion, less sterile, more lived in, just sleeping. He pulled a sheet off a dusty grand piano. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "She loved to play." He ran his fingers over the yellowed keys, a faint, discordant sound echoing in the quiet room. "After she was gone, my father couldn't stand the sight of this room. He locked it up. I never had the heart to open it again. Until now." He walked over to a small, ornate wooden box on the mantelpiece. He opened it and took out a ring. It was a simple, elegant gold band with a single perfect sapphire, the color of a twilight sky. "This was hers too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was the only thing of value she owned, the only thing my father never sold." He took my left hand, his touch reverent. "I know it's too soon. I know I am not the kind of man you ever dreamed of being with. I am selfish and possessive, and my world will always be dangerous. But I swear to you, Ilara, I will spend the rest of my life protecting you, honoring you, loving you. I will make this a world you are not just safe in, but happy in." He slid the sapphire ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. The cool metal felt like a promise, a brand, a permanent link to this man and the world he commanded. It was heavier than any diamond. It was a legacy. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in my life, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He didn't need to ask the question. We both knew what this meant. It wasn't just a ring. It was a commitment, a vow. It was the foundation of our future, laid upon the ashes of our pasts. That evening, we stood together on the balcony of his office, the one where he had first laid out the terms of my captivity. The sun was setting, just as it had on my first night here, but everything was different. The sky was still painted in brilliant colors. The lake was still a mirror of liquid fire, but it no longer felt like a beautiful prison. It felt like a kingdom. Our kingdom. Alessandro's arm was wrapped securely around my waist, holding me close to his side. His presence was a solid, comforting warmth. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the sapphire on my finger catching the last rays of sunlight. The fear was gone. The loneliness was gone. The desperation that had driven me to a quiet bar and a silent bartender was a distant memory, a ghost from another life. I had stumbled into the darkness and found an unlikely king. I had been his captive, his project, his weakness, and now I was his future, his queen. My life of quiet desperation was over. A new life, a life of dangerous love and fierce protection, was just beginning. And as I looked out at the vast, beautiful, and treacherous world he commanded, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was finally, truly home.